Christian parenting.
As we continue our series on marriage killers or killer marriage, I'm joined by two of my favorite people in the whole wide world to discuss the importance of communication in marriage. You're going to love, if you don't know them already, you're going to love them by the end of the day, Matt and Jenny Price.
Most of the conflict, a good bit of it anyway, in most people's marriages, I think, is over communication. It's not, we've all had that where you get in an argument and you're like, what were we even talking about? Whatever the substantive thing was at the beginning that was the source of the discussion has been lost because somebody said something in a way that hurt the other, and then it becomes conflict around insensitive or poor communications.
Hey, my name is Jay Holland, and this is Let's Parent on Purpose. It's a podcast to help you thrive and not just survive your parenting years. Each week, I'll bring you an insight or an interview that will help strengthen your marriage, your family, or your personal walk with Jesus. And if you find it helpful, I encourage you to subscribe, share it with your friends, and you're welcome to go to letsparentonpurpose.com to find all kinds of past articles, issues, and resources to help your family. I have been at my church here in South Florida, Covenant Fellowship Baptist Church, for 13 years now as a member and then as a pastor. And the reason that I've been able to stay as a youth pastor, an associate pastor, and be planted in the same church for so long in the midst of massive change in my family, chaos, crisis, health crises, normal human things, all of that is largely due to the leadership, the servant leadership of my senior pastor, Matt Price, who's not only my pastor and my boss, but he really is one of my best friends and one of the people that I admire most in life. Matt and Jenny have been married now for, I think they say in the podcast, 30 years. They have been at Covenant Fellowship for 25 years now. You don't find many pastors that stay in a place that long, but they have committed their lives to serving the community, serving the local church, and serving Jesus. And they do it in a way that really is hands-on, is transparent, and has set the tone in our church for broken people to be healed by the power of the gospel because we learn to get past pretending that we have it all together. We talk today about one of the core issues that makes or breaks marriage, and that's communication. Over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about communication, sex, family dynamics, extended family dynamics, and a few others. But this is one I think they just bring a lot of wisdom to. They've had decades of not just their own personal marriage experience, but counseling couples in every facet of it. If you are on the Treasure Coast and you have a church home, fantastic, stay there. But if you're on the Treasure Coast of South Florida and you don't have a church home, I love just getting to introduce you to one of the main reasons why I'm at Covenant Fellowship, and that's my pastor and his wife, Matt and Jenny Price. You're going to love them, and share this episode with somebody that needs to hear it. Here you go. Matt and Jenny Price. It's been a lot of time with you guys to not have you in the same room for a podcast ever before, so...
Yeah.
Welcome.
This is exciting for me.
Yeah.
First time.
Yeah. Jenny it's almost her podcast. She's been on so many times before.
Yeah.
The right kind of podcast.
Yeah. But, so thank you guys so much for joining. For those that don't know you or maybe don't know a little your background, would you care to just maybe briefly tell the story about how you guys met and how you convinced her that you were the one, Matt?
Yeah. Just a story of persistence. I'll make it brief or try. Give the briefer version. Yeah, we were both freshmen at Florida State, and I think we met the first time, one of the very first weeks of the semester at Campus Crusade for Christ meeting, back when they called it that. Apparently, I was pretty unmemorable. I remembered her, but unbeknownst to me at that point, she had a boyfriend of like 4 years, and I just assumed no guy around. She must not be taken. So I would look for her in the cafeteria and try to be slick, and I'm sure I wasn't, but, is this seat taken? And so that's initially where we got to know each other. And then I remained involved with Crusade. She, not so much. She got involved with Young Life, which she had been involved with in high school in Orlando. Yeah, just became friends. Again, I didn't find out till maybe a month or so later that there was a boyfriend, and I figured, sooner or later he'll bobble the ball, and I'll be there. And but the story I like to tell that I would stalk her in a non-psychotic way, but or at least that's the way I'd like to think it. So yeah, she worked in at Bill's bookstore, which was on the east side of campus, and I lived on the northwest corner of campus and would walk like 25 minutes across campus to go through her line at the bookstore. And I'd be waiting. At first, I would get the cheapest thing in the bookstore, which at that point was a Bic pen for 35 cents. And I would wait in her line, and the other cashiers would say, "We can help you." And I'd say, "No, I'm good. Waiting on Jenny." And then I'd get up there and we'd visit, and then I'd get out my checkbook to prolong the experience and write a check for 35 cents where she had to ask for my phone number and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I was pretty slick. That did not work, but through the next year and a half, became good friends through I started working with Young Life as well. Yeah, eventually, just by becoming, there was a process, but becoming really good friends, and of course I had to let go of the, I'm gonna get this girl here. And when I was willing to do that, the Lord, opened her up to the possibility and enabled, dropped the scales from her eyes and enabled her to see my wonderfulness, and moved pretty fast after that. So we've been married. It will be 30 years in August that we've been married. We're actually married halfway through college, just because we said, hey, like to do this the Lord's way, and don't particularly want to torture ourselves. We have to wait a couple more years. And so we were married before our junior year.
So 30 years marriage, and now 25 years at the same church here at Covenant Fellowship Baptist in Stuart.
In June. Yeah.
Congratulations for
Thank you.
Both of those things.
Yeah. In fact, last week was Easter, and it was on Easter Sunday, 1996, that we were in Stuart for the first time. Even having grown up just directly across the state, I'd never been to Stuart. For our visit, where we were coming to meet the people and coming in view of a call.
Jenny, did he get it right?
I saw the light. I was broken down and I saw the light, and now I'm doing a podcast with a man wearing a dad bod shirt. I do think that's fair for the audience to know that Matt is representing the dad bod.
Yeah, there's reasons that it's only an audio podcast. So.
Yeah, and this was a gift from my kids. I didn't even know what a dad bod is. That's basically them saying, yeah, that means you used to have a nice body and now you're just a fat dad.
All right. So you all, over 25 years, part of pastoral ministry, and because of that, pastoral wife ministry, just an endless stream of couples at every stage of marriage that you've been involved in. So you've gotten to see the best of what can happen in marriage, and you've also been there in the shattered pieces of a lot of people who had very good intentions when they got married. And you've done, do you have any idea how many weddings you've done?
No, I'm not very good at keeping track of that kind of stuff, but it's been several.
Right. You should put a stamp on the side of your truck for each one you do, and then you can cross it out if they get divorced, so we can keep tally like that.
I think I still have a winning record in terms of that, but and I approach that differently than I used to. I mean, years ago, anybody just about, they would say, hey, we're looking to get married. Would you help us? Like, well, they're going to get married one way or the other, including some who would come and say, yeah, well, this pastor won't marry us or whatever. And, so, they may not be where we'd like them to be, where they ought to be, but, might be a part of the, the process the Lord's going to use them to move along, if they actually have a positive interaction with a pastor, and, got to do counseling with them and got to lead a lot of people to the Lord that way. As time goes on it's like, I don't want to be doing 3 weddings every Saturday for the rest of my life. And there's a sense of like, if they're going to give us the opportunity to be involved in their life and their growth and some level of accountability, then yeah, we'll help them take that step. But I don't do nearly as many as I used to, just for that reason, and practical. As your kids get older, and
right.
every wedding you do, you're missing a ball game, and prioritize those things.
Yeah. So as I think about everything from premarital counseling to crisis counseling, it feels like there's a set of recurring themes that come up: money, sex, communication, extended family. People have no idea how much their extended family is going to affect their marriage. And I think ultimately, like, marriage issues come down to hardness of heart. But we were beginning a series on just marriage killers. And what I would like to focus on today is just communication. Communication is one of those things that it's so strange that people who are entering marriage all think that they have good communication skills. And then you get into marriage and you don't have the proper communication skills. Like you communicate exactly how you think that you should communicate, but that doesn't always work for the other person. So maybe let's just start with the baseline. If you all are talking to a couple who is on the front end of putting their life together, what are some of the things that you would share with them of, like, these are really important communication steps that you need to keep in mind? Jenny?
I would say that date nights is a huge part of that there's a consistent time that they're being together and having fun and being intentional about that connection. Because for me, as a wife, I think the connection needs to be there in order for the communication to have an effective impact. And I think one of the things we are not consistent about this right now. And when we had little ones, we were so consistent about pre-planning the week ahead, meeting on Sunday nights and looking at what the week ahead entails. And the third thing that I think is our biggest win in what we have practiced in marriage is timing of conversations. Not all conversations need to happen at the exact moment that one person thinks they need to happen. And for me, they don't work really well at 10 o'clock at night. And for Matt, I feel like what works for him is giving him fair warning that there's a conversation request. So those are a few of my ideas.
Yeah, I really like that timing when if it's an important conversation, it deserves an important piece of time. And so you don't want to do it as you guys are getting ready to run out the door somewhere, because, God forbid that's the last thing you ever say to somebody. And that happens. Like, you never know when the last conversation you're going to have with somebody is. And you certainly don't want it to be intentionally sour. But the other end is, like, if you run out the door with nasty or unfinished things said, not only does it taint your whole day, but I find, like, I'll spend my day having imaginary arguments, and man, I really let them have it, and man, I really showed them, and it's never going to go that way. At least I hope that it never actually goes that way. So it's just a very unhealthy thing. Whereas, like, if you see this coming, like, oh, this is important, but we don't have time. If just one of you will say, hey, we need to talk about this. I know this isn't the right time. Can we set aside time to talk about it? You're communicating something even more important than that actual issue, which is, like, I care about you enough to make the space for this in there. So I love that time one. I love all the ones you said, Jenny, but that time one really stands out. Matt, what are other ones that jump out to you that are just good baseline skills?
Well, first of all, let me just affirm Jenny's answer too, because I think it's important that she knows that I think she gave great answers. Yeah. So in addition to those, yeah, and even with respect, like, to timing and stuff, obviously, if you can find a time of, especially if it's around a conflict, to find a moment of non-conflict to address that, so everyone's not quite as defensive as they might otherwise be. There are, you do find yourself in these times, for instance, when the disagreement, now we don't have this in our marriage, but some people might, comes late in the evening. we have found, I think, we have been unsuccessful in saying, well, why don't we just put this off till tomorrow? Because now some things will work that way, but if, so don't let the sun go down on your anger, and that's a tough way to go to bed when you're not together. And so that would be the one caveat to that if it's not something that you're proactively looking into the future that you can say, but if there's been a discussion that's resulted in somebody feeling hurt or whatever, we do try to resolve that. And sometimes it goes great. And then other times, one of the things we certainly and more early on experienced is, I would probably tend toward, needing to make my point over and over. And the important thing being that she understand why I'm right, which of course is not always the case. And then I upset her to the point where she cries. And then it's like, okay, I'm sorry. Bottom line, I was a jerk. This is about my control, not about you. And, so that would be the one caveat is, and man, in conflict, which is of course a subset of communication, so much more important to just prioritize your oneness than it is to win the battle, because you do lose the war. The one thing I would say in general is I think a lot of people have maybe an incomplete or wrong understanding of what even communication is. And so if people understand that, in order for communication to take part and to take place, it's not just me saying what I, need to say. It's technically it's one person sending a message to another and the other person receiving that message as intended by the sender. And so I think a lot of people are attempting to do communication thinking, well, yeah, I said what was on my mind, and yet if you don't take into consideration the condition of the receiver and how it's received, you may have just accomplished miscommunication. So that's a part of it is understanding, okay, this is my intent. This is what I want them to understand. And so knowing your spouse and being a student of your spouse and understanding the filters, that they're hearing through, and then being hopefully proactive in trying to bring the message in a way where it will be received as intended and not. Because most of the conflict, a good bit of it anyway, in most people's marriages, I think, is over communication. It's not, and we've all had that where you get in an argument and you're like, what were we even talking about? Whatever the substantive thing was at the beginning that was the source of the discussion has been lost because somebody said something in a way that hurt the other, and then it becomes conflict around insensitive or poor communication. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, Jenny, you deal with, and I don't know if deal's the right word, but like you work with so many ladies and so many wives, and rarely does somebody come proactive of like, you know what, my marriage is in a good spot, and I just want it to be in a great spot. Like by the time that they hit, often the pastor or the pastor's wife, it's things are bad or really, really bad, or I'm just stopping by to say hi on my way to the lawyer. When you think of maybe some common streams with wives, and even the communication frustrations that they deal with that take things to very, very bad, are there any common threads that you can think of like, these are the kind of stories that I seem like I hear over and over again?
Yeah, I would definitely say the people who are hitting crisis mode like that typically have got things from their own childhood that are irresolved, that have not been, they've not sought therapy for their own personal healing, and they're looking for their spouse to be way more than they're supposed to be. So they're just in that sucking, dry place of there's nothing left. And I would say, I mean, obviously it's way more fun to work with people who are on the front end and in prevention mode. and that God's not finished. There's two people in a marriage, and there's healing to be had. My counsel to that woman would be, what is it that you can affect change in the marriage, and what healing maybe are you not dealing with for yourself, that you're, maybe leaning into a person for an answer that's not there, that only God can provide.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a result of some trauma that they haven't worked through, but unrealistic expectations are, very common. It's like you're looking for your spouse to be something that God never intended them to be. And that's a part of it.
And I think sometimes, especially when you talk about unresolved things from your past, whether it's your childhood or previous relationships or whatever, oftentimes you can connect with a spouse and they're an escape before they're a spouse, like as you're beginning the relationship and they're your boyfriend or girlfriend or even fiance. They are an escape from actually dealing with those issues. And you think, okay, I'm moving away from my family experience or whatever that past experience is with this person. So I've escaped it and it's never going to come up again. And then all of a sudden you get married and you realize, oh, I brought all of that with me. Or you don't realize it at all. You just think, oh no, my spouse is yet another one of the people who is disappointing in life, because this stuff does have to be resolved. Like you, for good or for bad, you bring the sum total of your life experiences into your marriage. But the same is true, for that other spouse as well. One of the things that seems to be common is ladies being frustrated at the lack of communication from their husbands. If you could talk to husbands and men, what is something common that you hear wives say that maybe, like, if a wife told the husband directly, they're so wounded that they can't hear it? So maybe coming from Jenny, you can say, hey, this is a really common thing that you should pay attention to because I hear this quite often from wives. Is there something that kind of stands out in that path?
Yeah, I love that question. I would say absolutely what stands out is share a feeling. So men, you don't have to share all your feelings. I think when women are saying to their husbands, I don't feel like he's communicating with me, it's because we don't know how they're doing. It's not that it's for the women that really, and I'm talking from my experience as a wife as well. It's share a feeling. Tell me how you are. And it doesn't take more than a few minutes.
Yeah. And that's foreign to a guy, most guys. Not that we don't have feelings, but, as a guy being sort of task oriented and driven in that direction, generally, we don't necessarily, it's not that we don't value, certainly we don't have feelings or value that, but it's like, what's the point in talking about the way I feel?
Yeah,
like my job is to get the job done or whatever. So, and that's where, again, communication, like being proactive in, speaking to one another, like, hey, how can I support you? And if the husband's job, per scripture, is to love the wife and to make her feel loved, then it's incumbent upon the wife to say, hey, this is something that makes me feel loved. This is something that helps me feel close, is when I know how you're doing and what's going on inside of you beyond I'm good, which, like, okay, if there's something that I need to do, I'll do it. If there's something that we need to do, we'll talk about it. But guys think about what needs to be done versus how we're feeling. So usually you can identify something if asked.
Let's Parent on Purpose has always been about equipping moms and dads to build thriving families centered around the hope of the gospel. If you regularly listen to this podcast, you're actually among a community of parents that spans 68 countries, including many in the 1040 window, where there are few churches and limited access to the gospel. As the amount of content I produce over the years grows, so do the cost of maintaining, storing, and producing all of the different details that help make this show helpful. If God has put you in a place where you might be able to help a little bit and support this work, would you please consider going to letsparentonpurpose.com/support and either giving a one-time gift or becoming a regular supporter through Patreon? If you're not in a good place to support the show, that's fine. I pray you continue listening, growing, and sharing it with others. That's it. No hard push. Just a simple request that if you're able to and would like to, help share the load of the show at www.letsparentonpurpose.com/support. Not too long ago, I had a podcast with Sissy Goff, and we talked about emotional vocabulary, helping develop an emotional vocabulary in our children. And I think that's one of the things that's really challenging with a lot of men is they just never really developed a broad set of emotional vocabulary. So it's, how are you? Good, bad,
Fine.
Yeah. And by the way, fine meets the requirements of, it can substitute for good and well, whether you're asking how you are or how you did. Fine.
Right. And fine can also mean not fine.
Right.
So fine is really not helpful whatsoever. It's just going to prompt more questions. So men, get a thesaurus.
Well, they actually, I don't know if your guests mentioned that, but and this is something we've used with one of our kids who has challenges, connecting with emotions. They actually have emotional flashcards.
Yeah.
Where there's you literally look at a smiley face or a frowny face and it's like, what's this one? Identifying, that's frustrated. That's, and as silly as that feels, like something that rudimentary could be helpful to, wives, get yourself a set of emotional flashcards, and there's free entertainment for a date night.
Right.
Just make it something fun, and hey, let's talk about this. And that also says to the husband from the wife, in a time of non-conflict, not like, hey, I want you right now to dredge your innards and come up with some descriptive word, but to say, this is important to me. And even when we spend time growing our vocabulary, that lets her know that you care.
Yeah. Yeah. And wives, at some point you may just have to be content with the fact that he's not as emotionally complex as you, and not just content with that, but maybe happy.
Yeah. Thankful for it.
Yeah. Thankful for that.
There's a reason.
Because I don't I'm a pretty intuitive person with my feelings, and I also don't analyze my feelings a lot, and it's not terribly helpful for many of the things that I do. It kind of gets in the way of some of the stuff I do, but it's also important to be able to access that. So I like that. That's really low bar, which is helpful. So husbands share a feeling.
And now I'm going to increase it.
No.
Because I do feel like it's more than that. It's, we want to know you. Our girlfriends are expressive and emotional creatures, and we can get all those needs met somewhere else. I do believe that I hear this from women. I want my closest friend to be my husband, and I want the highest level of intimacy. So it doesn't have to be a feeling. I'm changing my mind. It can be anything.
Well,
telling me
this is
how
something
you
that
are.
this is what I'm dealing with.
Not just what we're doing next.
Right.
It's not. It's something about you.
Yeah,
So,
but you do have to also, by the same token, you can't require your husband or expect your husband to, feel the way that you do, or and even at the depth, or pretend to, or the way that you want him to, because he's wired differently. And so our job is to connect with, and it's kind of like when I go to the chiropractor, what's the level of your pain? I'm like, I don't know, 2. She's like, 2, that's pretty good. I'm like, well, I mean, compared to what? I hear a broken femur is incredibly painful. So if that's a 10, then sure, I'm at a 2. It's an annoyance. I feel it. It's unpleasant. Something's wrong. But, I mean, come on. How do you, come up with something even that? So how are you feeling? I'm okay. And I got a lot going on. I'm carrying a lot. I probably am not taking the time maybe to care for myself the way I need to. And I'm open to having that conversation, but I don't know there's a word for it. But I think even having that discussion, really it's about closing the gap relationally and emotionally between the husband and wife. It's not like, oh, great explanation. It's, we connected even in just saying, yeah, I've got a lot going on. I'm dealing with this. There's this pressure. There's this, kind of fear behind what if this doesn't happen or what if it goes this way. And also, as you said, Jay, yeah, I don't spend a lot of time there. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about, well, what if? Because I can't do anything about that. So I want to focus myself, my energy where I can do what I'm called to do. I'm going to leave the rest to God. But letting your wife be a part of that and, know where you are, I think is certainly valuable.
Yeah. And if I were speaking to wives on, and this isn't necessarily something that husbands articulate a lot, but they identify with when you say it. If I say something, and by the way, in case my wife happens to be listening to this one, like this isn't her. I hit the wife lottery that she's pretty black and white. So but if I say something, try to assume that that's actually what I mean. That like there's not 6 layers underneath what I'm saying, because I'm generally not capable of. I might be capable of a layer or two, but like if you're pushing for good communication, at some point, like you just have to accept that that is what it is, and it's possible that there's more to it, but it's also possible that I've never explored that there's more to it, and also like I'm trying in that way. So giving the benefit of the doubt. Ladies will be helpful in here. I think one of the things that happens in crisis marriages is that things go unattended for so long that then when there's an opportunity to speak about something, we bring so much tension to it and so much. It's like, well, if we don't resolve it right now, it's all going to topple, and so. One of those is just like, even if you're in crisis, you didn't get into crisis yesterday. Like it was kind of a long time getting there, and it was probably multiple little reps of either negligence or poor things said or whatever. And so if you can, even in the realm of communication, kind of back up and have that longer view that it's, you didn't get here overnight. You're not going to get out of it overnight. You'll have particular times of breakthrough, but you can't schedule those particular times of breakthrough. And so becoming intentional with like just giving yourself many opportunities for low-level, low-stress reps is really helpful to de-escalate those situations. So what are some different ways that might happen? So we've got a couple, they realize that they're in a strained level of communication. What are some helpful strategies for introducing kind of low stakes, low level reps, but they can get the ball moving forward on there? What do you guys think?
I would suggest a couple baseline questions that you're asking often, like a couple times a week.
Okay.
And examples of that is, how can I better support you this week? I don't think there's any spouse on the planet that wouldn't want to suggest, hey, this is something. One of the things when I asked Matt that question, it's I'd love a home cooked meal, and that's not my forte, and that's feedback. And if he asks me that same question, I'm going to say, I need time with you. Mm-hmm. And so I think them coming up with the questions that serve the crisis is probably the best thing.
Instead of you just giving them, but that's a really good one. That's a kind of a Swiss Army question right there, that unless you're just looking to be escalated, that's not an escalating question.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's one of the great questions that, we encourage couples to ask one another daily. And we do this, like, hey, for me as a husband, how can I make you feel more loved? Or how can I can better support you? And the wise spouse doesn't respond by saying, well, you've been doing this and this and that, and quit doing it, but it's a open-ended, good-hearted question. Hey, it says, I want to do my job. I want to do it well, and I want to work smarter, not necessarily harder. And developing that pattern is whether they're newlyweds or trying to work their way through a crisis. And I think in crisis counseling, unfortunately, and this, even in premarital, one of the things I always do is say, hey, listen, this time will be beneficial to you, but even more beneficial than this time, where you're, full speed ahead to the wedding day, And if we're honest, a lot of this that we're doing is just because I'm requiring you to do it, not because you've come to the conclusion that like, hey, I got issues I got to work through and I want to be a great spouse. But saying, hey, counseling is a good thing, and it is a good thing to do proactively. Certainly, if you identify something that's going on that's become a pattern, man, go seek counsel. Do not wait. I mean, you would do that with your car. It's making noise. I'll turn up the radio. It's got a funny feeling. I mean, because what we get a lot of times is the automotive equivalent of someone is on the side of the road because it won't drive anymore and it's on fire. And it's like, yeah, there were probably a lot of warning signs along the way that you didn't do. So like abandon, and this is less the case now than it used to be for people, this notion that like, oh my goodness, has it come to that point? We need counseling. We all need counseling, and we don't do everything right. Like look in the mirror and recognize, hey, we got a problem and it's me. And once you can get that and the gospel and the reality of grace, if we get it, it gives us the freedom to do that, to go, yeah, I'm not the solution here. I'm at least a big part of the problem, and I'm my biggest problem always. And in this marriage where we have two imperfect people, that God's given us one another, not primarily so that we'd be happy in the moment, but that we would become more like Christ. And I think that's a big part of marriage, obviously, understanding the idea that it's God's desire, I think, is that we be happy, but that's not the primary one, that we become holy. And he uses my spouse in my interactions with her to help me see my own flesh patterns and my own, sinfulness, and then to have to deal with it in the context of that, like everyday accountable relationship. One of the things, and Jenny mentioned this sort of in terms of creating environments for communicating. And again, if you're in a marriage crisis, you just know, we didn't get here instantly. We're not going to get out of it instantly. I don't think I've ever seen a situation where if both people were willing to genuinely look for and accept responsibility for their part and wanted to make it work, and I'm talking infidelity and all sorts of awful stuff, that there wasn't all kinds of hope for a restored and strengthened and strong, amazing marriage to come out of it. And I'm also seeing couples where over the stupidest little things, pettiest little things, if they're not both willing to take responsibility, if they don't have motivation, desire to make it work, it ain't gonna work. Yeah, it only takes one to sabotage the process. But making time for communication, not just for the purpose of covering ground and logistics of who's going to do what and what's going on with this, but just how are you? And a long time ago we did the Growing Kids God's Way stuff, which is great stuff, and it's not for everybody, maybe only for people who want to grow their kids God's way. It sort of poisons the well at the beginning. But one of the great things about that is for, and you have to bring in family, because communication is one thing with just the two of you, but when you got kids and they're screaming for attention, and just with the baseline idea that marriage is based on the husband-wife relationship, that has to be the central relationship and the prioritized relationship in the family. We love our kids; they're welcome members of the family, but the family does not revolve around them. And that's one of the things that Western culture has really botched, is this idea that we grow strong, confident children by focusing on them and attempting to give them everything they want, that's actually how you make a spoiled brat, and how you set a child up for a rude awakening when he does discover that, unlike in his family of origin, the world does not revolve around him, And so, what does it look like then to prioritize the marriage? And there are all these little practical things, and one of them that we loved and used and have shared with a lot of couples they call it couch time,
Mm-hmm.
which is, a traditional family where, mom, whether she works or not, she's at home and dad comes home and the kids, of course, want to be with dad. And after giving dad, a couple of minutes to decompress and change clothes or what he wants to do, that mom and dad have 10 or 15 minutes on the couch. This is before dinner, this is for anything or after dinner. I guess it matters. But where mom and dad say to the kids who are, of course, wanting to be right there. Now, why are they wanting to be? They're wanting to be right there because mom and dad are together. And that brings them great security. So they want to be in the middle of that. But mom and dad say, hey, we love you guys. Go play.
Mm-hmm.
Mom and dad need some time alone. And yeah, you got to set that boundary. And they realize, wow, they actually really love each other. And then that's just time to say, hey, how are you? How was your day? And connect and know, hey, this is, there's a lot of miscommunication and conflict that could be avoided even later in the evening if I know, yeah, my wife's had a really rough day and she's tired and she's hurt or she's irritable or whatever, and vice versa. So, but man, if you can establish those patterns and traditions that are all about connecting and communicating just to stay connected, then you're going to be more sensitive and you can respond better. And there are so many other benefits with your kids.
Yeah. I am thinking of the car illustration that you gave of, most of the time that you guys are called in, it's not even the mechanic, it's the tow truck. And it makes me think, like on our vehicles, you have that little check engine light that comes on, and there's a yellow one and then there's a red one. And so I've gotten really adept at ignoring the yellow check engine light. It's like, I know how to fix that. Get a piece of black electrical tape and put over it, solve that problem. But the red one, you ignore that for very long and you're going to be seized on the side of the road. So just, the warning ones, I think of look for these cautions in your marriage. If the words always and never keep coming up in your discussions with your spouse, if when there's some kind of emotional discussion about a subject and then another subject gets pulled into it where you're not sticking to the subject, that's a caution, because at that point, it kind of goes to the third. If you're more interested in winning the discussion or the argument than winning your spouse, at least your yellow caution light is on. And the thing is, you don't get a pick when that becomes the red one in there. And so, and I think that you've given some really good maintenance strategies for this to not happen. So if you're hearing always or never, if you're feeling other subjects coming in, if you're more intent on winning the argument than winning the spouse, then you need to be more intentional about how can I support you? You need to be intentional about scheduling a date night. And you can be poor and schedule a date. You can go on a walk in your neighborhood and leave everybody at home. You can barter with other friends that have little kids and trade off to where it's generally not twice as miserable to have your kids and somebody else's kids as to just have your kids. So you trade for a night, let them trade for a night. There's plenty of creative ways to be intentional about these things. Be intentional about that couch time or some version of it that works for your family. This stuff goes a long way, because there's the verbal communication that we do, but there's a whole nother layer of communication that is our actions and our intentions. And that's really, I think, what sets the tone for most marriages is how do I think my spouse is for me or not for me at all? So, and this communication, I like this discussion we're going to do. Next week's podcast is going to be on another marriage killer or a marriage super perk, and that's sex. And this communication discussion sets so much of the ground for that one. So I there's a lot to be said on this subject. Jenny, you are the most resourced of all of us. What are some of your favorite resources to send people to in terms of looking at communication in their marriage or improving it?
Ooh.
Way to put you on the spot there. I gave them no questions ahead of time, by the way. So.
I mean, there's books that I refer to often. His Needs, Her Needs, 5 Love Languages, Boundaries.
Love and Respect.
Love and Respect, absolutely. So we could list those.
Yeah, those are good. Yeah, we'll list them all. hey, thank you guys. And let's pray. Matt, will you pray for those listening that God would just bless the communication in their homes and that Jesus would be in the center of a grace-based marriage?
Yeah. Father, we thank you for the opportunity to spend this time together and for each one that's been a part of it as listeners. And we just ask your blessing upon them. I thank you for the fact that they've given their time here. That's indication that they want to grow and they want a growing marriage and to be faithful to their spouse and to love them well. And God, we thank you that you've made us different, that's by design. And Lord, I pray that you would give us grace both for ourselves and for one another. Thank you for the reality and the transformational power of the grace of the gospel that allows us, even in the context of our marriages, to acknowledge our brokenness and our tendency to, Lord, to respond and to act in ways that are completely unhelpful and unloving, and in our heart are not what we want to do, and yet we find ourselves in these cycles. And so, thank you for the gift of marriage, and that through it you gently and over time reveal to us our need to depend upon you more fully and to allow you complete access to our lives, to Lord, to transform the things that don't honor you and cause us to stay stuck in places that you've not created us to live. I pray that you would give us boldness and a great desire, Lord, to support one another well, and a commitment, Lord, to work on these things, including our communication. Help those who, Lord, this just doesn't come naturally to them, to be willing to take those risks and to attempt to verbalize what they're dealing with, feeling, and give grace to those that for whom this comes very naturally. That we could encourage one another to take those steps. And again, you've been so good to us, and it all starts with what's in our heart. So pray that you'd continue this work of transformation in us, make us more like you, more loving. And we thank you that every marriage can be better. And when we put our eyes on you and move closer to you, Lord, that's going to happen. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, guys. Friend, if you're still listening all the way to the credits, then I hope that means that this was a particular blessing to you to hear this podcast. If so, I want to encourage you to share it with somebody else that you think might be helped by it. You're welcome to go to letsparentonpurpose.com to find out more information about show notes, about past issues, all kinds of things to help your family. And I do want to say that Let's Parent on Purpose is a user-supported podcast. And if you would like to be a part of that, you can go to letsparentonpurpose.com, learn how to be a supporter through Patreon or through a one-time gift. Thank you so much for listening. Again, share this with somebody that you know needs to hear it. Remember that parenting is a marathon, not a sprint. And we'll talk to you soon.